الله بالخير. لعل الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية تدخل عام 2026 بانتصارات انتخابية تخفي هزيمة أعمق. الناخب الأمريكي لم يعد يختار، بل يحتاج. نظام سياسي أسير نخبة مالية، والشعب يعيش في اقتصادين هما أغنياء يملكون السوق وأمة تغرق في الغلاء والديون والبطالة والخوف. ثورة الذكاء الاصطناعي تحولت إلى صدمة اجتماعية، استثمارات بمئات المليارات، لكن الوظائف تختفي والإنتاجية لا ترتفع. ترامب نفسه أمام مفترق حرج، شعبوي بلا زخم، وحلفاؤه الممولون يطالبونه بولاء مطلق لإسرائيل، بينما قاعدته الماجا تشعر بالخيانة. أما أوروبا ففي حالة إنكار جماعي، تسير نحو انهيار اقتصادي وتمرد شعبي، ولا تملك إلا خطاب الروسوفوبيا لتبرير العجز. هل وصلت الديمقراطية الغربية إلى لحظة لا تعبر فيها الانتخابات عن الإيمان بل عن الرفض؟ هل ثورة الذكاء الاصطناعي صناعة المستقبل أم فقاعة جديدة لحماية النظام القديم؟ وهل نحن أمام أفول النظام النيوليبرالي أم أمام ولادة نسخته الرقمية الأكثر استبداداً؟ أم هي لحظة الحساب؟ وما البدائل؟ نرحب بكم ونرى ونسمع أكثر مع لاري جونسون، المحلل السابق في وكالة الاستخبارات المركزية CIA والخبير بمكافحة الإرهاب في البعد الأقرب. هذه الميادين، وأنا زينب صفار، خليكم ويانا. Salam and welcome to الميادين. This is Zainab Al-Safa for the proximate aspect, and my dear guest is Lari C. Johnson, American former CIA analyst and counterterrorism expert. How are you doing, Larry?
Zainab, it's so good to see you, my friend. I'm glad you are healthy and well, and I apologize for my lack of formal attire.
No, thank you. Thank you for taking the time, actually. Pure pleasure to have you. And always, we thank you for being with us. Let's dive right into the matter, Larry. After decades inside the system, the CIA, the State Department, when you look at the current information landscape, do you still see intelligence or mostly propaganda?
Unfortunately, it's turned into more propaganda. A lot. It's almost, it has become an oxymoron to refer to it as intelligence, because intelligence implies something that's smart, that's well-informed, that's looked at things from a variety of perspectives, and that is concerned with the truth. But instead, what I have seen, and it doesn't matter whether we're dealing with the genocide in Gaza, the attack on the Palestinian people in the West Bank, the illegal attacks on the people of Lebanon, or the war in Ukraine, that it is a never-ending flood of propaganda on this side to present a narrative that is completely divorced from reality.
Mm-hmm. Today, Larry, what happens to an analyst or operative who insists on accuracy of a narrative? Do truth tellers still have a place in the intelligence world? And if the truth itself is now classified, what happens to a nation that forgets how to tell the truth to itself?
Now, they get fired. They lose their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
We had an example of this in March of this year. With respect to the war in Ukraine. And let me explain a little bit of the process so your viewers will understand it. When when I was writing for the presidential daily brief, there would be a publication that would go to the president. And I wrote the article. I was at CIA. I would have to coordinate and get approval for what I wrote from the analysts at the Defense Intelligence Agency, the analysts at the Bureau of Intelligence and Research at the Department of State, and the analysts at the National Security Agency, just as an example. And ideally, you wanted that everybody would come to a consensus. Yeah, we agree with that, or you need to change this word. Only in the rarest circumstances did we have what was called a dissent, where somebody said, no, I fundamentally disagree with you. I think you're wrong. We're not going to modify our position. So they would write a piece that would rebut or present a different point of view from me. That very thing happened in March of this year, when it was the question arose, would Russia agree to a ceasefire? And the CIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, took the position that if the United States applied enough sanctions and economic pressure, that Russia would cave and would agree to a ceasefire. The two analysts at the Bureau of Intelligence and Research said, no, that's absolutely not the case. And they went forward and put their dissent in. Reportedly, President Trump was so upset by that that the two analysts were fired. So what happens when you've got this kind of political blowback on analysts trying to tell you what the reality is, that the analysts, then they stop telling the truth. Right. They understand that they can't afford, unless they're individually wealthy, they can't afford the risk of losing a job and not being able to feed their family.
Sure. On another matter, Larry, how do you best describe the socio-political climate in the USA today in terms of the recent mayoral elections, Mamdani becoming the mayor of all states, New York City, against the tide of billionaires, plus the longest shutdown in history, the latest surge in consumer inflation, the AI death cross due to a steep drop in job openings, this dysfunction and gridlock in Washington?
The system no longer works for the average American. And what we're seeing is a fragmentation of the American political landscape. We're really going the way of Europe right now. If you go into the United Kingdom as an example, the support for both Labour and the Conservative Party, the Tory Party, each of those are down around 16% of support each, which means an overwhelming majority of Britons reject both of them. The party that's most popular, the alternative offered by Nigel Farage, reportedly has support at 32%. Well, I'm not great at math, but I do understand that 32% is a lot less than 50%. So you don't even have a majority consensus about who should be in charge. And that's what's happening here in the United States now. Yes, the Democrats had a very good outcome a week ago Tuesday, but the overall support for the Democrats is still very low. The same thing with the Republicans.
But Larry, allow me to jump in here. Today, there's a declining MAGA voter enthusiasm, as some put it, a MAGA fracture, tensions between America First populists and pro-Israel mega donors. Right. So there's a kind of split, a MAGA split versus the deep state, right?
Oh, yes, huge. It started, really, the decline of Trump started when he refused to follow up on his promises to reveal the information in the possession of the U.S. government about Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein, clearly, in my view, was an agent, an intelligence asset of Mossad. Part of his activity was involved to gather compromising material on politicians, wealthy businessmen, information that could be used to blackmail. And ultimately, he was executed in prison by the U.S. government, killed because he had too much information that could be embarrassing.
Mhm.
Donald Trump has gone out of his way, prevent that information from coming out, and this is the real crux of the matter. The MAGA crowd that really believe in America first, put American interests first, and the one who's probably the most articulate on that front is Tucker Carlson.
Mhm.
But what they're up against is these people that are advocating Israel first, the Zionists first, and the U.S. interests take a back seat. Now, that has really come to the fore in a very heated way. You've got a number of prominent Zionists like Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro. They're launching just vicious, vile attacks on people like Tucker Carlson. But the Tucker Carlsons, the Candace Owens, the Steve Bannons, they have a much wider audience than
Mhm.
any of the sort of the traditional Zionist crowd does. So, but it's a definite split, and so that part of Trump's base has eroded. Right now,
Right.
he was up. He was up when he won the presidency a year ago. He had about +2, +4% among the under 30 crowd.
Mhm.
Now he's under -40%.
Mhm. Mhm.
The people under 30 are rejecting Trump,
So
and
what does that explain, Larry?
Trump hasn't kept his promise.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
he promised to keep us out of unnecessary wars. Instead, he's becoming a new war president.
Sure.
He's facilitating. Yeah,
Yes.
and the murder, the daily images of murdered Palestinian children and women,
Mhm.
it particularly resonates in the West, in America. There, people, the people who are my age, yeah, they're watching regular television. They're not seeing that, but the under 40 crowd, they are seeing it, and they're horrified by it.
Right. Larry, we've crossed paths while in Russia, in Moscow and St. Petersburg. I know you've been a frequent visitor to Russia and observer of Russian
Yeah.
affairs with deep and wise acumen in this regard. You've said publicly that the West has been lying to itself about Ukraine. What is the
Yeah.
single biggest truth that no one in Washington wants to admit about the war and why it matters?
We're supporting a group of neo-Nazi authoritarians who are attacking Christianity, the foundation of, the Russian foundation. Its birth as a nation started in Kiev more than 1,000 years ago, and that was their conversion to Orthodox Christianity. So the fact that this neo-Nazi crowd, uh, who have actually made a very strange alliance with the Zionists. I mean, this is, the story we're told of the Holocaust about how the Nazis were going to exterminate the Jews. Now we're watching these people like Zelensky, who are Jewish, but
Mm.
are Zionists, embracing Nazis. It's totally absurd.
Mhm.
And the West refuses to acknowledge that. Plus, the corruption, the level of corruption and the money that's being stolen in Ukraine is just off the charts.
Right. Now, Europe's political class clings to denial over Ukraine and internal dysfunction. Consequently, the elite's repression of dissent and fixation on Russophobia may provoke deeper unrest. Has Europe, Larry, consciously chosen vassalage to Washington, or is it trapped by its own fear of irrelevance?
Yeah, I think it's more the latter, uh, because what is it that Europe has? I
Mm.
mean, what do they make that anyone needs? What do they possess any natural resource that other people are desperate to acquire? No. Um, all they really have to offer is a legacy of colonial exploitation, where they have robbed other nations, they have brutalized the people of other nations, and they have tried to control and dominate. And what we're witnessing now with what we call it the global South, and but countries that used to be sort of willing to acquiesce or submit themselves in a subservient fashion to the colonial powers in Europe. They're now throwing those chains off and standing up and said, no, we're no longer going this route. And that's what both Russia and China, recognize that this is a new era. We're witnessing the birth of a new international economic and political order.
In this
But
sense,
as with, go ahead.
yes, sir. In this sense, how do you explain the growing strategic partnership and alignment between Russia, China, and Iran?
Yeah, well, it's if nothing else, it's a recognition. During the American Revolution, Benjamin Franklin said something to his other revolutionaries. He said, if we do not all hang together, in other words, if we don't stay together, we shall surely hang separately. And he was recognizing that in unity there is strength, and if people go off on their own and seek their own individual objectives, they become vulnerable. So I think both Russia, China, and Iran have awakened to the fact that the West is not a reliable negotiating partner. The West, it's a completely different mindset. The West mindset is a zero-sum game. There can only be one winner, and we have to be the winner. But whereas, especially the Russians, but I believe it also applies to the Chinese and to the Iranians, they're looking more for a cooperative. How can we work together? How can we all benefit one another?
Right.
It doesn't have to be a win-lose situation.
And speaking of Iran, why do you think that any imminent Israeli attack on Iran could backfire and result in significant defeat for Israel?
Well, because Iran is awakened from its slumber. Prior to the attacks on June 13th of this year, Iran really had rejected very firm offers from both Russia and China to assist with air defense and to provide additional military support. In fact, Russia had offered, if you will, a military pact. Iran rejected it. They said, no, we'd rather do it ourselves. We'll be friends, but we don't need to be in that kind of relationship. After the 12-day war, I think they finally woke up and realized how foolish that was, and have now embarked on a very close relationship, both militarily, economically, politically, with Russia and China. Because in the course of this, the so-called snapback sanctions that frankly were never lifted, they tried to keep in place, and Russia and China 10 years ago supported those sanctions. But now Russia and China came out very clearly and said, no, this is not right. We're not going to abide by this. So, right now the biggest threat facing Iran is the water crisis. And there is evidence that the United States, using what are called chemtrails, has been actually releasing, let's call it pollutants, into the atmosphere above Iran that have affected rainfall. So this I think is part of a longer term, very devious, evil plot by the United States to
is that based on information, Larry?
Yes, yes. In fact, Tucker Carlson just he had a person who's an expert in this area who he interviewed 2 days ago. If you haven't seen it, I'd encourage you to watch it. He lays out damning evidence of what has been efforts to manipulate the weather, and in manipulating the weather to create specific problems like this drought that Iran is experiencing.
Right. Despite all that, do you believe the world order is shifting? Are we witnessing the twilight of the neoliberal order, or merely its transformation into a more authoritarian digital phase?
Well, I don't think it's either or. I think as it is becoming more irrelevant, it is going to revert to that more authoritarian, vicious stance as a way to hang on to its power. But what is inevitable is the power, the dominance that the European, let's call it this neoliberal model, has occupied for the last 400 years, 500 years, that's slipping away. That is going away. Russia, China, India, Brazil, South Africa through BRICS, they're on the cutting edge of creating something new. And the death and destruction that have accompanied what the West has tried to do to the world stands as an indictment against this Western model, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Right. As a former CIA analyst, one last question, if I may, before we let you go. What
Sure.
should we be paying attention to that is flying under the radar, Larry?
Payments, how payments are being made to settle trade. Right now, to this point, the U.S. has counted on the fact that you can't live without the dollar. You got to have the dollar. And they've used that dependency as a way to punish, coerce, and bully other countries.
Mm-hmm.
China and Russia have taken the lead in creating an alternative system that does not rely upon the dollar. And I think a lot of people around the world still haven't grasped that point.
Mm-hmm.
But one of these days, it's going to become very apparent. And if you will, the old economic order will collapse, will pass away. A new economic order will emerge.
Mm-hmm.
But hopefully it's one in which, we see fewer attacks on civilians and an actual commitment to upholding civil rights, the rights of people to live.
Right.
And,
one last word to Gaza, Larry.
Yeah. Well, with respect to Gaza, I'm still appalled that the world, despite paying lip service, has not done everything that's in their power right now to force Israel to stop its Zionist madness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Russia and China, in particular, I believe, have the power to they can isolate Israel economically.
Mm-hmm.
Same with India. So there are these countries in the global south that are not doing what they can do. Turkey is another example.
Sure.
Cut off the oil.
Sure.
Cut off the oil. But this continuing enabling of this Zionist plot is, it's the Palestinian people are paying a terrible price.
Right. Larry Johnson, American former CIA analyst and counterterrorism expert. Thank you very much, Larry, for taking the time to be with us today. Always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Zanab. Same here.
Most welcome. نعم، لعل خرائط الإمبراطورية لم تعد ترسم بالحبر بل بالاستثمارات والنفط والقواعد العسكرية. فشل ترامب في ضم الشمال أي كندا وغرينلاند، فحول بوصلة أطماعه نحو بلاد الرافدين والشام، نحو الشرايين القديمة للنفط والتاريخ، حيث أقدم الحضارات وحيث ابتكاراتها ومهد الأديان في العراق وفي سوريا ولبنان وفلسطين. الأنابيب حلت محل الحدود والتحالفات تباع وتشترى كما تباع العقارات. كل مبعوث أمريكي إلى المنطقة هو سمسار، وكل وعد هو دفعة أولى. إن حروب الغد قد لا تندلع وتبدأ بالقنابل بل بالاندماجات والعقوبات والجيوش المخصخصة. ومع تغير المد العالمي من واشنطن إلى غرب آسيا تبقى الحقيقة واحدة: من يسيطر على مفترق الحضارات يملك المستقبل. في الخلاصة، هل باتت المعركة على هذه المنطقة الخصبة والثرية بمواردها ليست فقط معركة حدود، بل أضحت معركة على من يكتب مصير العالم. من كل الميادين، حياكم.